A Tribune news story of sorts, about as close as a Tribune can get to an actual news story. By the way, one of the things they say about the Safety Act in this story that is just untrue. This is what you have to deal with.
Right,
The cash bail measure has been controversial for those concerned about the public safety impact of the provisions, talking about the Safety Act, the Pritzker Purge Law. Though studies of bail reform measures in other jurisdictions have not shown a significant effect on recidivism or failure by defendants to appear in court. That's not true. Actually, the study that was done of the bail reform in New York, which doesn't go nearly as far as Illinois, did find a correlative increase in crime as a result of the disposition to let criminals, those accused of serious crimes, walk without bond. It did. So that's just not true. But okay. The anecdote that kicks off this effort to report news by the Tribune. In October, in Livingston County, Judge Jennifer Bauchnecht issued a lengthy decision following a detention hearing just weeks after cash bail was abolished across the state. Said the judge in Livingston County, where you still have some sanity, you have to get really outside of Cook for sure, and to some extent the collars. I mean, certainly in a place like Lake County that would elect Al Reinhardt, its state's attorney, that's not a good indicator. Anyway, Livingston County judge. She wrote, all right, since its founding, this country has used monetary bonds in conjunction with pretrial conditions as an effective tool for ensuring that a defendant is not at risk of harm to others in the community, does not commit any criminal offenses while out on bond, and that he appears as directed at all future court dates. This is in a case involving someone charged with soliciting a child.
Ew.
Yeah. She said she would have given the defendant a reasonable bond, but without that discretion, she ordered him detained. An appellate court vacated her decision, finding the court improperly focused on its disdain for the recent statutory charges. No, I think the disdain was both with respect to the Safety Act as well as to the defendant before her that had solicited a child. Yeah. So what we're seeing, in the initial wake of the impact of the Purge Law, Pritzker's Purge Law, is a significant spike in the number of appeals in cases just like this, where prosecutors might want a defendant detained, judge may want a defendant detained. The decisions per the Purge Law can be a bit murky, based on somewhat subjective standards of threat to public safety. And so you have more activity at the appellate court level on this matter, but you certainly have more defendants, as anticipated, that's the purpose of the law, more defendants who would have been held over for trial that are out roaming the streets. And again, as we mentioned before, I think yesterday in talking to Ted Dabrowski, what we need to see is CWB Chicago to expand its operation to get to at least Chicagoland, cooking the collars, because this series they've been running for 3 years, just this narrow group of accused and oftentimes convicted, usually convicted criminals. The series they've done the last 3 years, the number of people who are out on electronic monitoring or now just out awaiting trial for a violent felony, who attempt to kill somebody or do kill somebody while they're awaiting trial for another felony charge, usually gun related or something like this.
Preventable crimes, whether it be a murder or rape or carjacking or armed robbery. I mean, it's the whole long list of it.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody has the data. As we were talking to Ted yesterday, it's difficult to cull together. But we certainly can have the lived experience of people that are in the justice system every day and what they're seeing. And so for perspective there, we're pleased to be joined again by Eric Weis, who is the state's attorney for Kendall County. Eric, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, we appreciate your time and your insights, as I said, as somebody who does this daily. So what is the the lived experience over the last year plus since the implementation?
Well, I'll tell you, the appeals you were talking about is it's overwhelming right now, Dan and Amy. It's, I mean, every case, there's no reason for the defendant not to appeal his detention or even his conditions. So we're seeing, as that article said, and there's some truth to some of the stats in there, over 1,000 appeals already on just this pretrial detention. And it's going to overwhelm the system. That's what ultimately happens is they're spending millions of dollars in the appellate prosecutor, the appellate defenders, dealing with it in the court systems at the trial court levels. We're just seeing a huge influx of those appeals that we didn't have 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Well, did Governor Pritzker know about this? I mean, that this is one of the ramifications and one of the consequences of what he did?
Yeah, well, yes, he allocated $50 million of your tax dollars to, pay for this, so we could. I don't know what we were going to do with it, but that's what we did. We spent $50 million a year to hire more people or to contract this out so they can handle these thousands of appeals that are coming each month.
And what I don't know if you have data on it, just in terms of your purview in Kendall County, but
sure.
what is the result of the appeals? I mean, these I assume most of the appeals are coming from criminal defense attorneys who want their client released, and a judge has held them over for trial. And if that's right, if my instinct is right, then what is your sense of what's happening at the appellate court level in terms of upholding detentions versus releasing the accused?
Well, what we're seeing so far is that at least the appellate courts right now are saying that the trial court made a decision, we're going to kind of honor that decision unless it was so far afield that we just can't. And I think you see that in Livingston County. Hey, you got to make a decision based on the law, not your opinion. But what we're seeing, though, too, is, and I think that article mentioned, is judges, first of all, prosecutors aren't seeking detention as much as they probably could because they're worried about appeals. They're worried about a judge not detaining someone. Then we have the whole issue of judges. They don't want to get reversed. So they're going to err on the side of not detaining someone if they have to, unless the evidence is overwhelming. So if you look at like Cook County, which you would think you would have the highest number of appeals, just based on their number of cases and the number of violent criminals that they have that they should be detaining and defendants should be appealing, they have the lowest number.
Really?
Well, what does that tell you? That tells you everything about the culture in Kim
Yep.
Fox's office, and the culture in Tim Evans, the court system that Tim Evans lords over. That as well.
Well, and the problem with that is that means those people are out automatically if they're not seeking detention, and they're going to other counties or other places or back to where they were and committing new crimes. That's the reality. Is we're seeing more repeat offenders so far on cases that we either can't detain or it makes it much more difficult to detain. And it's almost like a war of attrition. If we just keep imposing more and more obstacles to hold somebody and more things to get them back into custody, prosecutors will just give up, or judges will just give up at some point and let everybody out, and we won't have to deal with it. And I guess it really is not going to matter anyway, because we're not going to be able to stop people and arrest people for crimes down the road if Representative Slaughter's bill starts coming into effect. So we won't have to worry about that anyway.
Right. Right. You're talking about the Justin Slaughter, who was the sponsor of the Pritzker Purge Law, the Safety Act we talked about yesterday. Now he wants to eliminate all traffic stops for just about all traffic violations short of DUI.
Including speeding. So I guess if you want to speed going to work, I guess you'll get to work faster. You won't have to worry about being stopped by a police officer, and laws won't mean anything at some point. I don't know if that's the intent going forward of we're just going to slowly erode the police ability to do their job and the court system, and we'll get back to, I don't know, purge system or anarchy, or I don't know what.
Dear Lord.
Well, it'll just be
vigilantes.
It'll be like the Audubon everywhere, which is kind of fun.
Do you think he's going to be successful with that?
I can't believe that, at least in speaking to people around here, even the Democratic, representatives up there, they were shocked it was filed. But again, I didn't think we'd be here where we were with the, cash bail issue and not addressing the issues that the court system and prosecutors had about holding these people. But here we are.
So when you talk about people not detained in Cook County and then they're out in the collars and potentially committing other crimes while they're out, we've seen that. It's not hypothetical. In addition to whatever is sort of endemic in Kendall County, are you seeing a greater incidence of crime both locally as well as from outsiders coming in? Not just repeat offenders, but a greater incidence of crime across the board?
We're seeing more from outside of our county than we have in the past. And I know it's only a short window and it could just be a spike.
Right.
I don't want to, prejudge something on a couple months, but we are seeing much more from the Cook County area coming out this direction than we have in the last few years. If that continues, we're going to continue to see that spike of more and more cases in our system, causing us to either try to find more prosecutors, open more courtrooms, expand our jail system if we have to. It just continues to come this direction. And it's only been a few months. Kind of, 3-4 years from now, I don't know where we'll be. And if it continues on that trend, it's not going to be a good one.
And what you mentioned the jail. What about that? The sort of the daily population in the Kendall County Jail, and this is something else we've got to check out. But what you're hearing from some of the other collar counties too, or is the daily population on the decline?
It depends on the day. Obviously, we have inmates that are sentenced that are coming in there. The ones that we're holding obviously have gone down pre-trial. We are fortunately in Kendall County. Our judges have been very good about the ones who are seeking detention. We don't get every one of them. It's not an automatic, but they are doing a great job of going through and detaining those that should be detained. But we're having to make tough calls because we know what the law says and we know what the appellate court can do if it gets up there. And no disrespect to them. I mean, they're doing their job and based on a law that they didn't implement and they didn't pass. But when it comes to the numbers pre-trial, they are down.
Yeah, so that was anticipated. What else, the other features of the Safety Act? I know, again, this has only been since the fall, so it's not enough data. But again, just the experience and what you're sort of getting a sense of what this is going to be like. So some of the other provisions we talked a lot about in the fight over the legislation, and even after the legislation was modified, despite the fact that Pritzker said during the entire governor's race that didn't need to be modified, but it was anyway after the fact. But like things like the time limits to get defendants to trial and so forth, that potentially impacted your ability to bring the strongest case that you could in terms of gathering the necessary evidence and so forth. That what are the other provisions that are challenging the work that you do?
Yeah, it is a little different on how we're doing things. I mean, Kendall's a little bit different than, let's say, Will County or Kane or some of the bigger counties. We have the ability to try cases a little bit quicker, but we are putting pressure on the crime labs. We are putting pressure on our law enforcement to get that stuff to us quicker because we're under that gun when we have to get those cases to trial. And obviously, they're very serious cases. It's not trying a retail theft in 90 days. It's a sex assault, it's an armed violence, it's a murder. Those are the type of cases that, as we continue down this path, especially in the bigger counties, we're either going to see those people out or we're going to see those cases not being charged right away because they have to wait till they get all their evidence. And while that's out, someone's committing a new crime or some witness is being killed or whatever it happens to be. That's going to affect law enforcement and the prosecution of those cases and the safety of the communities in general.
He is Eric Weis. He's the state's attorney for Kendall County. Eric, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Dan. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
If you're purchasing investment properties and having challenges securing a mortgage, you need to call Team Hochberg about a debt service coverage ratio loan. DSCR loans allow investors to purchase investment properties solely based upon the property's cash flow, not the personal income of the